have to be careful with our words.
Ultimately, though, I think it's a question of freedom of the pulpit. I mean, do you think that as rabbis or Reverend Wright, we have the right to say what we believe politically, even if it is unpopular?
And I think a congregant has a right to quit that house of worship.
I think I was beyond freedom of the pulpit. There are certain things you say and certain things you don't say. Also, there's a difference between controversy and obscenity. What Reverend Wright said was obscene. And I must tell you, if I said "goddamn America" from my pulpit, my congregants would get up and throw me physically out of the building.
But Jay, you also didn't serve. I mean, I don't know, maybe you did, but I didn't say in the bio I got yet that you served as a U.S. Marine. It also didn't say that you grew up at a time in which America was a segregated country. I mean, what this man lived through was very, very different than what most rabbis.
So we should say God bless America for what he lived through and the change they helped bring about. And by the way, I spent 13 years in the Army as a military chaplain, and at Temple Israel, with the help of Rabbi Hain, we house the Greater Long Island Martin Luther King Commemoration, which is the largest coalition of synagogues and Jewish organizations in America. And our keynote speaker is my friend Reverend Victor Hall, a Baptist minister from Queens, who when the bombs were dropping on Haifa, went with me to Israel and said, if you're standing there, Jay, I'm standing there with you. There's no excuse.
The Bush administration is pursuing the same policy that all administrations in the past have pursued, and yet you can't force a peace if the parties are not prepared to negotiate it.
I think President Bush has come very late to the table on this issue. That he is suddenly aware that trying to help broker peace in the Middle East is an issue.
Too little, too late, huh?
His presidency is very, very late, and I have to say, as much as I absolutely believe that every opportunity for peace should be pursued, we have a moral obligation to do that, whatever the circumstance. I don't know that I've really seen that he has been with us through this process, through his presidency.
What steps and measures could the administration have taken in terms of trying to improve Muslim-Jewish relations?
I think the most powerful tool against extremism is education and dialogue. And that's not where the money is. That's not where the energy has been. I think that is the most
Is it that there isn't
There's a lot of money in education.
Is it there isn't the money?
Television.
Whenever I've spoken to rabbis, I've always gotten the impression that that's one of the hardest things to speak about, the issue of infidelity. How do you manage or talk about those kinds of subjects with your congregation?
We do. I mean, and when something like this happens in public life, I think we have an obligation to raise it. What was very interesting to me is I could see that a lot of our people were grappling with the same issues that politicians' spouses grapple with when they're caught out, and that is, how common, how widespread is this phenomenon of infidelity in my household or in our congregation or in our community. So I think we have a moral obligation to speak out and to represent the tradition and the standards of the tradition. Having said that, I actually have a more tolerant and flexible view when it comes to the private morals of public officials. I agree. A governor is not our governess. And we know that. And we also know that the very people who are attracted to politics in the first place are people who have a propensity towards power and the sex drive, frankly. So, from my perspective, number one, it's not that I don't think that that we should articulate values. We should articulate values. And it's not that politicians are exempt from these values. They should be held to these values too. It's just that in electing them, my vote would go to those who represent more moral public policies. I care less about what they do in their family.
We are blessed that there are many different doors that they could enter through, be it Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist, Hasidic. I think this also calls for pulling our efforts together.
But let's not deny that Judaism started as a family, and the notion of Jewish identity being handed down from generation to generation, from parent to child, is a fundamental principle.
Absolutely.
We've always accepted the proper kind of convert when it's done properly. That is clear. The Torah reminds us of it repeatedly. But the point also should be that there is a clear quality to Judaism which makes it something other than just a universalist faith.
No,
it is a family,
but
and as a family, we're going to disagree.
No, but listen, but we're talking about
how
to include people in the family. That's exactly the nature of the discussion.
And I think one of the big pitfalls that I think communities can fall into in trying to be welcoming to interfaith families is being less Jewish. And that's not something I'm interested in doing at all. We're still a Jewish synagogue, and that's essential.